Was it like watching it? It's 10 years of your life.
Yeah.
Or parts of 10 years of your life.
10 years, starting quite a long time ago. Well, yeah. Didn't we look young, I suppose? There we go, Skipper. Thanks. Great, thank you very much. And we're all young and cute looking and, you know, long hair, shiny, puppy-like. But shit hot too, you know. The music's intense. And
does it bring back memories?
well, yes. I mean, especially, I really enjoyed the Albert Hall stuff because it is very early days. And I remember the feeling that we had in those early concerts because we just come back from America and people didn't really know much about us in England. The concerts we'd done were all small pubs and clubs and universities and that. And people used to come by word of mouth. You know, there was no press particularly around. They didn't really know what we were doing. And then we went to America, and then we made a name in America, and then the English press kind of got hold of that. And then when we came back to do the Albert Hall, suddenly everybody went, there's this great American band, and they're coming over, and we can get to see them. You know, it's like, no, we are English. And, but I suppose the Albert Hall was a sort of, here we are, and this is what we do, and, you know, look out type of thing. There's great swagger and bravado, and it all comes across on the DVD, I think. So it's exciting to watch.
If you compare the feeling of standing there at the Royal Albert Hall to the last episodes on Nebworth from 1979, what's the difference?
For me, the more interesting thing is the similarity. The same commitment is there on stage. Once you walk on stage and the music starts, you tend to forget about everything else. And then immediately it's the eye contact and listening for cues and listening and you know, a lot of concentration on stage in a Zeppelin concert. You know, you've got to be ready and, you know, you can't drift off thinking about things. It's and that was there right from the first shows right to the end. You know, you can see it in Nebworth. Everybody was still like Bonzo and I are still watching each other and making sure everything's right and right place, and there's constant adjusting and, you know, musically. I mean, you know, and that was always there. And every concert is given the same commitment and the same weight and the same treatment, whether it's in front of, you know, 20 people or 20,000. It's always the same. Everybody tries all the time, and, you know, it's not this is. Doesn't matter what we do here. Or there was always a very professional attitude on stage with Led Zeppelin.
What was the difference between the sessions you did in the studio and and being on stage?
Well, I suppose the audience is the main difference. Instant feedback. In the studio, you can to a certain extent get feedback from other musicians, perhaps, but also in the studio, you're often, it shouldn't be like that, but you're trying to get things right more often because you know it's going to go down on tape, and you don't want to spoil, especially in the days when bands recorded live, more or less. Not so much in the overdubbing days, but when they recorded live, because if you make a mistake and it's a really good take, you have to do the whole thing again. So you try not to make a mistake. On stage, you don't care. You can take chances because you know that once it's gone, unless it comes back on a DVD 30 years later, it's gone, you know. And so on stage you can be pushed, you can go further on stage. It's freer, and then plus the feedback from the audience, so that can result in a really, really good concert, really good presentation.
You mentioned before that the press didn't know much about you.
Right.
But then you had a lot of bad press. How come?
I don't know. I don't know what it was. It was the first bad press took us completely by surprise. which was the Rolling Stone review for the first album. And they said, and this band, I think they mentioned the word hype, and we thought, they're listening to the wrong album. This is the wrong band. They've made a mistake with the review, because the one thing that Led Zeppelin was hyped. You know, it wasn't a manufactured band in that sense. Everybody were really good musicians. We were very dedicated. We weren't pretentious. We weren't pompous. We knew we could do it. You know, we really could do it. We were all. And we didn't know who they were talking about. And it was like, do they mean us? And I don't know why. They may have, presumably had their own reasons. And most bad press, because we didn't do bad shows. The shows were really good. Most bad press seemed to be for some other agenda. You couldn't quite understand it.
Even though you turn out to be bigger than Rolling Stones, Stones still were on the cover of the music magazines.
Maybe it had something to do with it, the fact that they weren't. I don't know, it sounds petty, it can't be the reason, but sometimes I think that because the press didn't really have much of a hand in making us in the first place, perhaps they felt that we were standoffish or something. Of course, as soon as we started getting bad press, then we were definitely standoffish. Why talk to people who slag you off all the time? And then I suppose the rift maybe widened or was cemented. But, yes, in some cases it took till, I don't know, 1990 before we got good press again. And suddenly we're heroes of the grunge movement. Go figure. But it never really made much difference to us. It's hurtful when you know that you did a really good concert and I produced an album for The Mission once.
Yeah, Carved in Sand.
Yeah, no, Children.
Yeah,
Children. And I read a review in New Musical Express or something like that, and the whole review was how they hated Wayne Hussey. There was nothing about the record at all. And I thought, this is his review, this is his record review. And they didn't, and by the way, there's 10 tracks or something. That's all they said. And it's like, why? Why bother? If you don't like the guy, don't write about him. It's like, it's crazy, but sometimes the press are like that. And yet there's some really good journalists who really understood the music and really got into it and wrote great reviews. Not always good reviews. Sometimes if they thought that night wasn't particularly good, they'd say so. But if it's an honest criticism, you go, yeah, you're right, I know.
How the man who led Zeppelin, how important was Peter Grant?
Very, very important. He believed in us right from the word go. He had basically what he did was say that I'll take care of the business and all outside distractions, and I'll keep them away from you. And you just get on with the music. And he said, you do it your way. I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm not going to tell you should do this or do that, or you're musicians, you do the music. I manage, that's what I do, and that's what he did. He just cleared this big space around us. I was talking to Ahmet Ertegun years later, who said we weren't even allowed to, we were afraid to come near you in case Peter got angry with us, And they weren't at the recording studios, they weren't allowed to hear the music until it was absolutely finished. I mean, it was a unique state of affairs, but it was very, artistically, it was the best you could possibly have.
But he was in a way he had loads of innovations when it came to manage a rock and roll band.
Yeah. But he had a very simple premise that that the whole business relied on the band, relied on the artist. So all you've got to do is keep the artist happy, and then everything else will fall into place. And I don't mean run and do things for the artist, but make sure that the artist got paid properly for his work, and make sure the artist was treated properly. And then everybody would benefit. The promoters, everybody would benefit. And at the time he thought of this, nobody else was doing it. The artists were getting screwed right, left and centre, and treated like animals, and everybody was bitching at everybody else, But he came along and said, look, pay them, treat them properly, put them in good places to play, and be professional about it. It's quite simple. It wasn't rocket science in that way. He was just brave enough to push it through. There was a lot of people who were used to taking huge rake-offs in concerts, and they didn't like it. But he said, "Look, if you don't like it, then book another band." He was that confident, and it worked.
There were good times and bad times. And how did the periods when drugs came in to some members in the band, how did you struggle with that, or how did you manage to
Well,
deal
nobody
with
knew
it?
that much about managing them, as it were, in those days. It wasn't the age of therapy or rehab. That came 20 years too late for us. But as long as it didn't interfere with the music and with stage work, then we kind of had to leave it at that. You can't really go meddling in other people's lives, I suppose. And it didn't interfere with the music and the stage work. I mean, occasionally you get a hangover that would roll into stage, but soon, there was a fairly transparent relationship all the time, and you'd feel the odd one out if you turned up under the weather in any way, and I don't know, it was kept off stage, I suppose.
You did a lot of work on Improve Your Outdoor, recorded in my hometown, Stockholm.
Right. Yes.
Wasn't it particularly bad at the time?
It was probably, yes, it probably rose to a head then. But the upshot was that we put out a good album of the people who were there doing it. Robert and I were at rehearsals first. Fortunately, I'd just taken delivery of this big Yamaha organ synthesizer thing. I mean, it was 3 keyboards and full pedal board, and so, as is always the way with me, I was very inspired with this new instrument. So I just started writing stuff, and I had it delivered to the rehearsal rooms, and I was there early playing it.
Yeah.
And then Robert turned up next, and by the time Bonzo and Jimmy had turned up, we kind of finished the album, not written most of the album. And that's how that happened. And it was really done before we went into the studio, and then we went to the studio and put it down. But not much changed from the rehearsal to the studio. Whereas normally the writing process with Led Zeppelin is that an idea would start with any member of the band, perhaps, and then everybody would work on that idea, and became Zeppelin property, as it were.
How did you feel, John Paul, when everything ended, and especially ended in the way it did?
Well, it was terrible. It was a terrible shock. We knew immediately that was the end of Zeppelin. John Bonham wasn't the drummer of Led Zeppelin. He was a quarter of Led Zeppelin, and you couldn't just say, "Oh, get another drummer." A, you would never find anybody like him, and B, it wouldn't be the same band in the slightest. It wasn't a song-based band. The way the music was created was sort of on a continual basis, and on stage there's a lot of improvisation, and but even in the studio, the way it was played was what it was about. It wasn't an arrangement of a song where you could have any musicians come in and play, and it would sound still like the same song. But unfortunately, it happened at a time when we'd gone through perhaps the lowest period, at the end of the 70s. And Robert had lost his son, and I mean, it wasn't good times for us. But then after Nebworth, there was this new optimism in the band, and we were rehearsing for an American tour when John died, and so there was a feeling that it's 1980, new decade, and this, and punk had come and gone a bit, and so now we were all a bit leaner and musically a bit more sharper again, and then it just all stopped, But it was terrible.
As being 1/4 of the band, as you say, that John was, is it possible for you to play again together?
What, 3/4? You could call it 3/4, I suppose.
No quarter.
After no quarter, 3/4. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe, but it wouldn't be Led Zeppelin. There's no way it would be Led Zeppelin.
Okay, I had one more question about. Or do we have? Yeah, the one of your biggest songs, or I mean, one of the most played songs of yours is "Stairway to Heaven."
Mm-hmm.
How do you? What does that song mean to you?
Well, it has. It's kind of a Led Zeppelin sampler, isn't it? It has everything that we do in it somewhere. You know, it starts off quietly with the acoustic instruments, and then goes into a sort of mellowish, almost jazzy vibe with keyboards and that, and then the rock and roll starts. You know, the solos, and the song has a really nice dynamic, long dynamic, and with a bit in the middle, and then there's changes gear towards the end. I mean, it's got everything, really. It's just, I think it's good. And the whole, the mystical lyrics, you know, that nobody's quite sure of what they mean, but including Robert.
Robert Plant doesn't seem to like it.
No, he doesn't. I don't know why.
What do you think?
Maybe he knows what the lyrics mean. He doesn't like the lyrics. I don't know why. I think it's good. You know, maybe he feels he's sung it too often. I'm not sure why he doesn't like it, but you're right, he doesn't. But I disagree with him. I think it's good.
Did you feel at the time that this is a possible milestone of rock?
I don't know. I don't think in terms of milestones of rock myself. It was obviously a good. You know, Page had this idea of this long number that had different changes in it, and it was obviously going to be something good and something very interesting, something not done before really anywhere else. So I can't think of anything else that it was like at the time. And it's certainly, when you finish a track, you know how successful they are as to what you were aiming for, as to what was finally realized, which is really the only way you can judge music, recorded music especially. And it was very successful. It did all the things we wanted. With the arrangement and everything else. You know, as I said, it has a great dynamic and the solo at the end and then the final chorus. It's just, you know, it was great pop music apart from anything else, never mind rock. So,
did that capture that song, like from the very beginning with "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You"?
That was similar, yeah. That was probably
with the light side and the dark side, the bluesy side and the folk
Page always
side.
had that in mind when, but he would also. I mean, we were all good musicians, and so we knew the value of dynamic and light and shade. You know, to set one off against the other. Which is why we didn't sound like other bands, because other bands seem to just do light or shade, never, you know, in the same song. You have a slow song or a fast one, and to me that's boring. Plus, you ignore really valuable musical dynamics, etc., etc., etc. But Page always had this. He used to work out a lot of the heavy riffs on the acoustic guitar. And so it was kind of interchangeable, and all you had to do was orchestrate the guitar lines, and suddenly it was.
But it's fascinating to have an idea which comes from one song, which you develop into all that you did.
Yes.
Because you brought in so much into it with different musical
but also
styles.
we were able to bring so much into it. We were all very able musicians with wide influences and wide abilities. In different sorts of music, and so we could make that variation. I mean, there's some bands simply can't do it. You know, you wouldn't know what to play.
What do you like, Kashmir, by the way?
Oh yeah, I like. It's a big favourite of mine, Kashmir.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't write it.
No.
But Kashmir was a great showpiece as a number. it was very theatrical and the grand gesture, and it was. But then so was When the Levee Breaks in its own way, you know, but just less orchestral, I suppose, more bluesy, but great atmosphere, especially on the record. The atmosphere on the Levee is amazing.
What's your own favourite?
I have lots of favourites, all for different reasons.
If you just, you know, the Desert Island thing.
Hard to say. Ooh, the Desert Island one, I know Kashmir is pretty good. But then things like What Is and What Should Never Be it's really good. The way the rhythm comes in, the drums come in. When the drums come, it's just magic, that sudden changing of gear.
All I have to ask you also about all the rumors about the great myth and legend about Led Zeppelin as being the Crusaders who came and smashed hotels and
you have a few parties and they remind you of it in 30 years' time. I mean, you know.
But I mean,
you've got nothing else to talk about.
Come on, a few parties. Didn't John Bonham come to your hotel room door once, and he was taking a big sword and smashed the door and dragged you out of bed and left you in the hotel?
Maybe he did. But does that make him any less of a drummer? I mean, or a man? So I didn't notice. So the funny thing was that they looked at somebody else's room and said, "Oh, and this room's smashed up as well." And we said, "No, that belongs to the road manager. His room always looks like that."
To Richard Cole.
Richard Cole, yeah.
Yeah.
So, no, it's okay, that one.
So at the time when all this happened, you didn't feel that there was something strange going on?
There wasn't anything strange. Every band used to... The first hotel room I ever saw broken up was Herman's Hermits. I toured with them in Germany. Peter Moon smashed something. I was shocked. This sort of smiley guy. You're like, oh, okay. But that wasn't the interesting thing in Led Zeppelin for me, I have to say.
Why do those things happen? I mean, like,
well, you know,
of course...
well, especially in the early days, you'd do a show, you'd play for 2 hours or something like that, and you'd be like this. You come back to the hotel and the town is closed. The town closed round about the third number, you know. Kansas City shut, or wherever it was. Cincinnati, Ohio, I mean, I think it's still shut, Cincinnati, you know. And you just, high spirits, there's no food, there's nothing to do, the television, 2 channels, they've all gone off, you know.
So there's a practical side of it.
There is a practical side of it, you know, there's a lot of energy to explode. You've got to wind down somehow, and sometimes we wound down noisier than others.
And of course, I mean, like, when you came to the US, as you were quite young at the time as well, but there was, of course, that feeling, but also the feeling of being number one, which you... the huge success of yours. Yeah.
But why would that have anything to do with
No, but I mean, like,
else?
doesn't it
all
give
bands
you
used to party?
Yeah,
what,
but
we
not
did it
all
because
bands
we thought we could.
Not all bands are number one. You think it's...
No, but you don't, you know. You don't go wild just because you feel you're number one.
How was the feeling of being number one?
Well, I felt I was kind of slightly removed from the feeling of, you know, you read about the concert and you think, that's great, you know, wow, this band did really well.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't feel it's you somehow. Because the feeling on stage was always the same, as I said, from the early small shows to the big ones. And so you didn't really feel that, you know, we were on any sort of pedestal or any, you know, any deity or anything like that. It was just, oh, you liked it? Okay, great.
But someone come up to you, hey, John Paul, you're bigger than the Beatles.
Well, I'd say they were a bit silly. That wasn't true, though, was it? And the Beatles were household names. They had hit singles, they were on TV, they made films, you know. We couldn't really be. But in the rock world, I suppose, yeah, I suppose we were, you know.
Thank you very much.
Keep it.
John Paul, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's great talking to you. And by the way, nice production work also with the Mission album.
All right, thank you.
At the time, I interviewed both Craig Adams and Wayne Hussey.
All right.
So I just got the title wrong.
Yes. Right, that was the one after.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Right.
And good luck with your own further or forthcoming solo album.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll come and see you again. I'll try and play in Sweden.
Yeah, you should.
Can't be that hard.
That's quite a few of us who would like to listen.
Yeah. Okay. Although when we did the In Through the Outdoor,
Yeah,
I kept waking up late, and it was in December or something. So it was like dark for 3 weeks. We never saw the daylight at all.
No, and you stayed home like the weekdays, and then you went home on
On the weekend, I think, yeah. For the rest of it, Robert and I ate lots of Betty Palmer's.
Yeah.
Drank Crips Fatal.
Oh, Crips Fatal! You remember that
Huge
one?
amounts,
Oh
yes.
shit, that's disgusting.